It works.
those who didn't hear the initial introduction about cameras, this regretful lapse is excusable. For those who did, it's an impertinence.
Just run out through the machine and didn't even have to.
Just on the microphone. Fix up everything for the videos.
He doesn't have a mic. He's got his hat strapped in the metal right to there. That's really sweet. Just can stretch him out. They'll change the time.
This is really interesting. Oh, look.
But is it rock and roll?
Doesn't matter.
To which I respond, why no, it's Frippertronics. The second question is, which I can hear bursting tacitly from the lips of all of you, what does it sound like in stereo?
Going to find out.
All right. In order to say this is how it sounds in stereo, it would probably be best if I explain how this system works. And I would like to make public acknowledgement to Brian Eno for introducing me to the technology.
It was Greg.
I use the left machine for recording, the right machine for playing back. So I record the guitar here, the signal passes along the tape, and the distance is determined by the distance between the two machines, which is played back by this machine onto the left machine, where it's recorded a second time. Travels along the tape, is played back by this machine, played back a second time, and recorded a third. And so it goes on. And as regards the fairly straightforward question, well, how long can this process go on for? The time of delay is determined substantially by the quality of machines and the tape. So that if it's really feeble equipment, and I have worked with this, I get one or two good signal returns and then it's all over. So at that point one has to learn how to incorporate a remarkably high proportion of noise into many times. In fact, and water music too, that wonderful whooshing noise is in fact distortion. Well, the engineer was distressed to do so much distortion, and he actually stopped the tape, and I became somewhat Irish. And as regards digital recording, which we've probably heard about, but it's free of hiss. My normal response to it is that if I ever use digital recording, which provides me signal free of hiss, I shall have to record this. And I find it very simple. Anyway, at the end of the day, we have a signal on one side of the stereo, which by recording sound on sound, or one track onto the second track, we get this effect of stereo in two ways. Firstly, there's the time delay, which is determined by the playback sending a signal to a recorder, which is a delay. And secondly, technically it's different signals, because it's one generation of tape further along, and there's a slightly different frequency relationship. Now, let's find where we are. This is once again the beginning of the day. There were a number of questions which were asked, which if what is this slim little gap in the
I'll shut it off.
be able to
I wouldn't bootleg you, Rob.
you'd be surprised how many would though.
Have you seen any?
Oh yes. This subject of bootlegging is an intriguing one for me. That there are of course a number of different positions on this, where it's a social duty to preserve music. Were I a bootlegger, I've worked out a way of doing it well, which is I would release the record for the normal price and deduct the normal royalty for the artist, which I would send to him anonymously, and deduct the normal percentage for the songwrite and performing rights, which I should also deduct and send according to the traditional scale. Yet, from all the bootleggers I know who protest social conscience, I have yet to find one single example where the social conscience has been translated into financial terms to their detriment. Until then, I maintain my skepticism of the bootlegging industry. Yes. When I receive royalties for any of the King Crimson bootlegs, or the Frippertronics bootleg, I shall take a different view. I understand that there is an underground of tapes substantially passed from hand to hand. There are a number of people who are generally known by the term crimson freaks, who purely out of interest for that music passed between themselves a number of cassettes. In fact, when I played at the Virgin Record Shop in London, someone asked me, are you ever going to release some really hot Crimson live performances? And I explained that it was difficult to do so for a number of reasons. One would be that those performances where the spirit was excellent were perhaps not the best recorded situations, or the violin would be horrendously out of tune, or something like this. That were this to be a live record released in the traditional way would attract a lot of adverse criticism. But I said there is a man called Gerald Murphy at Copthorne Drive in Bristol, and gave the exact address. If you care to write to him, you'll be able to get every Crimson live gig virtually that was ever bootlegged.
What's his name? Gerald Murphy?
A letter from Gerald about 3 weeks later. Dear Mr. Fripp, I have been getting lots and lots of requests for copies of the tapes that I have. Then there's a space. There's just a man came to my door and said, could he have copies of all my Crimson tapes? I gave him one. Is this all right? Please write back immediately and tell me what I should do with this. Sincerely, Gerald Murphy.
How many?
He sends me current addresses. Every birthday and Christmas I get some very nice chocolate or nugget or confectionery or whatever from him, with a list of his latest acquisition of Crimson bootlegs.
Do you know Chris Raven from Devon?
Yes, I do. He turned up in Wimborne and waited outside my cottage for 3 days. And then I turned up and he said, hello, I'm Chris Raven. I've been hanging around for 3 days. And I said, what an impertinence. The man took no concern to write to me and say, could I have an appointment? He simply turned up on the doorstep and it wasn't convenient. You know, I would consider myself to be a very available person and quite human and not cutting an unpleasant attitude with people. But there are nevertheless ways of approaching me which, if you like, involve simple human decency. And turning up on my doorstep for 3 days is simply not one of them.
I agree. Did you hear the Chesterfield Jazz Club gig?
I believe I have heard of it.
Of 69?
Hold on, I actually have a tape of it.
In 69?
Yes. Yes. I have a tape of it.
Did you like it?
King Crimson booking. There was a question.
I was going to ask you, you're supposed to appear in a film, or some science fiction film or something?
Yes, this story is, I was asked by Chris Stein at Blondie, phoned me up one day, and he said, have you ever considered being an actor? And I said, quite the reverse. He said, well, how would you like to star opposite Debbie in a remake of Alphaville? And I said, sure.
When's this going to be?
If you care to look at this display here, on the back cover you'll see Robert with little microphones, secret agent microphone on my lapel. That is what Chris and Debbie were polite enough not to call my screen test for Alphaville. These photos were taken last December. And I sense that Blondie are now far too successful to have time for dabbling in remakes of obscure French films of the 60s. So the project is on kind of hold. That these sort of things in the film industry fall through remarkably easily. So the film world is even more precarious than that of rock and roll. But who knows? It might be something worth doing one day.
Why did Peter Gabriel re-record Here Comes the Flood on your album?
Peter Gabriel didn't record Here Comes the Flood, I did. No, it was Peter singing, but it wasn't Peter's choice, it was mine. He said, hey Mush, I'd like Flood on my album. So why Flood on my album? Well, first of all, because it's a beautiful song that was really cocked up on his album. I've heard 4 versions of it. One with the London Symphony Orchestra, which was so excruciatingly bad that the poor version, which is on his album, was released instead. The third version you may have heard on the King Biscuit Hour, which was Peter on... Actually, that's the 4th version. The 3rd version was just Peter on piano and me on guitar going rah-wee, rah-wee, rah-wah. The 4th version was me going rah-wee, rah-wee, rah-wah, and Peter on piano and the band joining in on the chorus. And the 5th version was the version on my album, which is First Take. I was mixing Indigo upstairs and I said, Peter was going downstairs to record Teddy Bear. And I said, here, you know that one? Yeah. I said, here Mush, record Flood for me, which he did in 1 take. Then I Frippertronicized it later. Beautiful song, and very much in keeping with the sense of that album.
Exposure and several other Polydor records which is including some that have gotten into the name of tremendous sound quality.
There are gentlemen from Polydor here who you can I will point out to you later, and you can personally approach. You see, it's frustrating for me, having spent nearly 2 years on the record, I actually mastered the record myself. I sat there operating the lathe, pressing the spirals and so on. I did, something like 42 sides, territories all over the world, with spares and with duplicates, so that it would be good. Pressing plants, what can I say?
Yeah.
It's a lousy American person.
It's so frustrating that, you see, with the recycling of vinyl, which is technically okay, what one does is to remove the label and recycle the vinyl. In practice, what happens, the label goes in with the vinyl too. So you get a downgrade. The only hope on this, I think, is probably the Laserdisc. You know?
Oh yeah.
I mean, even digital recording. I mean, the question, what's the use of digital recording if you can't press the record with this or not? It's for someone like me, it's really irritating. I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do.
What happened to...
On the same level, your album, King Crimson album, USA, almost a complete stop of sales when word got out that 21st Century Schizo advanced pressing and working in a record store, seeing a record stop. That was horrifying in terms of the artist.
Some people in this position take to drink or drugs or women. Some people leave the industry completely. Some go to asylums. Some have breakdowns. It's a very distressing situation that, from a logical and logistical point of view, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to be a recording musician. It's almost impossible to be a performing musician. That I was told I couldn't do this. I said, this is the tour began essentially with me doing this in Canada, and I was told 3 times not to go. And when it got to the point, I said, fine, I'm not coming, I'll just buy a ticket and turn up. All right? Things began to move. Then in England, I said, I wish to play in the Pizza Express at Notting Hill Gate. And I was told, oh no. We have a nice concert hall you'd like to play in. You'll be very happy there. And I said, but I would like to play in the Notting Hill Gate Pizza Express. Oh no. Very nice theatre. You will be very happy there. Riverside Theatre. Very nice ambience. Just right for you. And I played in the Pizza Express Notting Hill Gate. But who needs this? All the time. That I was talking about this on the way down with the 2 gentlemen from Polydor and Barbara Birdfeller, who handles press for me on the West Coast. The conventional wisdom in the executive level is 2 to 5 years old. In other words, what a record executive will be convinced is a smash hit would have been a smash hit 2 years ago, but then he would not have believed it possible. Current example, for example, is Bram Tchaikovsky within Polydor. That it would be unfair to Polydor to say that they haven't put much effort behind it. But they did eventually. And here I could be very indiscreet by quoting facts and figures all across the board, not only just with Polydor, but a number of different other labels. Yes, it's pretty disgusting and shabby situation generally.
Mr. Fripp, so you were talking about people who approached you improperly and not on a value for value relationship.
And what I'm suggesting...
But can I just ask you, so what would be a proper approach if someone had something along your line of interest and they wanted to approach you properly? How would they contact you? Do you have an address?
Yes, there is an address written on the inside of the album.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, for example, it's not a question of someone coming up and saying, do you mind if I take your photo? And I might or might not say yes or no. That's entirely reasonable. No one can take offence. If I'm not in the mood, I shall say no, and I don't take offence that someone is out. When I've introduced the concert as I did, and look up and there's a gentleman taking a photograph, in situations where I explained quite clearly why I would prefer this not to be so, I consider that to be a form of theft from the energy of the situation. And then, oh, I'm sorry. There's no sorry or apology involved at all. It was merely a lack of decent behaviour. It's just a rude thing to do. We needn't write books on cosmology or human interaction to understand this. It's just developing a sensibility of how to just approach someone in a fairly human way. For example, people come up to me and say, here's a good example. I do this spiel about the vampiric relationship. You know? And I introduced this, took 5 minutes to introduce what I was doing, and someone about a week ago piped up at the back, can I ask you one question? And since I was putting my attention on getting ready for the performance, it was at best tactless. But I said, well, is it important? And he said yes. I said, all right, what's the question? Can I touch you?
Oh.
I'll continue. And I said to him, well, obviously you haven't understood what I've just been saying. But if you apply your attention actively to listening, and I apply my concentration to performing, then in a very real way we will touch each other.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, if I've had 3 hours sleep 3 days in a row, I haven't had lunch or dinner for 3 or 4 days, I've done 6 hours of interviews, 4 to 6 hours of interviews, for 6 days on the trot, I haven't had 1 day off in 3 weeks, and I do 1 to 2 concerts a day. After 3 weeks of this, and I'm not exaggerating, sometimes it's difficult for me to respond in that way. Sometimes a little voice might sneak into the back of my head, do you need this? And the answer comes back, yes.
Well, the reason I'm getting my interest is, well, musically inclined as I know you are, I think you
love to. May I say thank you very much indeed. And oh,
And
incredible.
I'll lend it to you till tomorrow.
Oh, you're not going to give it to me? Oh.
I mean, I'm a.
How much is this?
It's like $12.
Could you get another one?
$10, I think it is.
Could you get another one?
Yes,
Could I give you $10 for this?
You'll get it.
I'm simply, in fact, not going to be able to hunt it down, so I'd be very grateful if you would do it.
And you are friends with Peter Hamilton.
Yes, sir.
This person over here is a very good photographer. He took a picture of Peter Hamilton up in LA and Destiny sent that blue paper back.
All right. Thank you very much.
Who is it that you say specifically that John Lennon is not playing bass?
Yes,
He
he did not. Tony Levin played all the bass parts on the album.
Who's the vocal bit on Growing Up on a Cigarette?
Which vocal bit? In the middle?
Oh, I don't know. The male.
Singing.
The singer is Daryl Hall.
Oh.
The voice in the middle saying, "Think of God alone, dismiss every other thought from your mind and you will see God," is the Shiva Puri Baba, an Indian holy man who was recorded by Bennett in 1962 and 3 in Kathmandu. He was at that age 136. He died in 1963 at the age of 137. He laid down on his side and said, "I am gone," and went. At the age of 25, he went off alone into an Indian forest to wait until he should see God. And he simply waited until he did, which he did at the age of 50. Then returned to his teacher and said, "Well, what should I do now?" And his teacher said, "Walk around the world." So the Shiva Puri Baba took him literally and walked around the world and spent 50 years doing it. And in fact spent the last 3 years of Queen Victoria's life with her, obviously waiting to see her off. And then resumed his travels, returning to India in the late 1920s, where he took up residence in Kathmandu and spent 4 hours a day talking to anyone who wished to come and see him. And in 1962, Bennett went to him. And the story here is that at a very distressing part of my life, in the summer of 1977, when my love affair with Joanna Walton was in a disastrous state, and I was feeling very sorry for myself, I went down to my sauna, the Apple Health Spa, on East 22nd between 1st and 2nd, and sat in this sauna thinking, oh boy, woe is me. I'm not such a nasty man that I deserve all these problems. Oh, why should this happen to a nice guy like me? And then I suddenly thought of the Shiva Puri Baba saying, "Think of God alone, dismiss every other thought from your mind and you will see God." And that kind of put things in perspective.
Well, what I can finish telling you. Okay, there's a little note in here, and it gives like the information on where that was, because it's published in London. It would be easier for you to get it.
You mean, would you rather I took my $10 back and gave you your book?
I would rather you look at it if you want to look at it, and then I'll ask for you.
Practically, I'm not going to be able to do that, so...
Okay, well then,
we can see.
Well,
All right.
Yeah, that's better.
You can always send one.
Yeah.
thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's very nice. Oh, that is really nice. That might be quite